Jacqueline Long, president of Evins Communications, talks to host Doug Simon on PR's Top Pros Talk.
I might talk a little bit less in this episode because we're talking about active listening. So, Jacqueline, can you give us your brief definition?
Happy to, and thank you for having me. I'm really humbled to be here. Active listening is really your soft skills superpower. It's a communication skill that involves fully concentrating and understanding what someone is saying, really trying to tune into their thoughts and feelings beyond just the words.
So, what role does that play with your client base?
A terrifically large and important role because we're in public relations. So part of that is storytelling, a large part of that. And you can't be a master storyteller if you're not listening to the right stories first. So today, any good PR strategy has number one, active listening, listening to consumers, listening to different audiences, stakeholder groups. And we're in a great time right now because there are so many terrific listening tools out there. We use Yardstick Insights at Evins to really understand the consumers we're targeting.
Yeah, and that's listening to data that's out there. Does it also apply in specific conversations, meetings, communications internally? And maybe what role does it play? Is it more significant for PR practitioners, maybe than for those in other professions?
Absolutely. When you practice active listening, it's the key to building influence and trust. And that's a foundation for any business, but especially for public relations professionals. When you are an active listener and you're giving space to those other voices, you are actually signaling to someone that you value them. So when you value other people, they're contributing more, you're building better rapport, you're establishing trust, and you're doing these things that are going to make your decisions stronger, and it's going to make your relationships better. So it's really important that we keep it in mind and kind of get rid of some of those distractions if we can. And that's something we should all be working on and doing more of.
You mentioned distractions. What are some of the distractions that can get in the way that we want to try and sort of put in a box to the side so we can really be effective at actively listening?
So we live in the noisiest era in human history with 24/7 news cycles, digital overloads, quick form content. And then you have a lot of people remote working on top of this. So all of these things are leading to an erosion of our attention spans. And when you're giving somebody your full attention, you're giving them a gift. And our ability to do that is shrinking. So we need to spend even more time practicing our active listening. And it's that much more important today.
Yeah, I get it in like one-to-one communications and maybe group communications, but how about part of the PR world is communicating one to many through different channels and outlets? Is there a way that you can convey you're actively listening when it is more one-way kind of messaging?
Absolutely, because it starts with listening to your audience. It starts with looking at what they've been saying, which indicates how they're feeling. So whether it's through social listening, digital listening, predictive analytics, you want to get as much detail, insights, and information, business intelligence on the targets that we're communicating with so you can communicate with them most effectively.
Obviously, you see a downside if practitioners aren't actively listening. What are some of the things that go wrong? And please feel free to paint horror stories so people are motivated to become better active listeners.
It's a critical situation because when you're not actively listening and that is not practiced in a firm or even in interpersonal relationships, the bonds are broken. So the relationships are not as strong. It leads to employee retention being reduced. There are trust issues. You're also diminishing your innovation and your creativity because people who don't feel heard are actually going to stop contributing. So if you want them to contribute, if you want to be most productive, if you want to get rid of some of the mistakes and some of the inefficiencies because you're having to have those dialogues repeatedly because you're not hearing it the first time, you're not engaging with it the first time, we need to listen better.
Yeah. And if your message isn't resonating, trying to go out with the same type of communication's probably not going to be effective. Now, obviously, you're a master listener, and I'm aspiring to be maybe like an A minus listener. Maybe I've improved my grade half a point in this. What can someone like me do, or those watching? How can they become active listeners themselves?
Yes. And you're doing great, by the way.
Thank you.
There are tremendous amounts of cues that we can use and tips we can talk about. The simplest being nonverbal. So that's your eye contact. That is not 100%, but you're looking at someone when you're speaking to them, right? This is paraphrasing. When you're listening to someone, they're telling you a story, you can go ahead and paraphrase, say how you're interpreting what they're saying back to them in your own words. Something that I'm going to tell you that is probably one of the most powerful communication tips out there is the 2-second pause. Maybe the most powerful 2 seconds in communications, which is pausing before responding. And it signals intention that you're intending to listen to someone and to understand them and giving them space, right? And another one we talked about at the top of the conversation was about removing those distractions, which is a lot more difficult when you're on virtual meetings. I think the most recent statistic was about 82% of individuals said they cannot fully concentrate on a virtual meeting. Again, making our work even harder and active listening more important.
Yeah, I could see that's so important with that high percentage. And you wonder if it's just in office, out of office, because there are distractions everywhere. Any final thoughts you want to add? And I hope my pause was close to 2 seconds there.
Yes, I think that this is something we can all come to master if we concentrate on it. And it really has roots in relationship building. So if you want to have strong relationships in your personal life, in your business life, and you want to have some of the keys to trust and influence, that's what you need to do. Literally listening to individuals to understand, not to respond.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
this brings up another thought that I had listening to you. You know, obviously your role at the company expanded to even a higher leadership role a few years ago. What was the importance of being an active listener when suddenly you had a raised role within an organization?
When you are not listening, you're missing insights from your team. So you're missing valuable information. It's not just what they're saying, but you're tuned into their thoughts, their feelings. So when you connect emotionally, you're better able to understand some of the strategic moves you have to make instead of just reactionary decision making.
Sometimes there are challenges when someone is promoted and maybe others are not at the same or they're promoted with. You have to navigate that. It can be a
Mhm.
difficult situation. For someone maybe earlier in their career,
Mhm.
do you have any advice for them on how they can help advance by growing their listening skills?
Sure. When I got this promotion, and when I first came to this company in different stages, the first thing I did was go on a listening tour, literally sitting down with everyone in the company and hearing about what their pain points were, what was working, what was not working. And that helped me to really get a clearer picture of what was going on at the agency and also how people may be feeling, what they're liking, what they were needing. So it really can give a bit of a roadmap into what you want to do and how you want to get there with your team. Because it's so important to have that strong collaboration, which is only going to happen if you're putting that effort forth, if you're giving space to those other voices. Most leaders do listen more than they're speaking, which is something you said at the top of the call. We have two ears, one mouth, right? We've all heard that. So it's really a tool that can be employed now and more importantly, the rest of your life, right? You're always going to be using deep listening, active listening to engage people and to influence and to gain trust.
Yeah, well, you've provided a great roadmap for people on how to get there. Thanks so much for being with us on the show.
Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the time. Thank you.